Okay. I imagine you're going to leave that trunk for the inspector and then run away yourself, right? Ayato blindly dashed through the mountains. He ran all the way to a small dale barely covered in snow. Why? Why? What made me think I had to kill her? It wasn't not killing her that would be his ruin. It was the other way around. He would have realized that if he'd been thinking even the least bit clearly. But his hands had acted on their own. Now he was a murderer. The dale led to their old secret base. The deserted hut was still there, looking the same as it had all those years ago. I had to open the door, buried behind a mound of snow, and stumbled inside. He then collapsed onto the floor and wept. It won't be long before Saya's body is found. There's no way that Ruckus hadn't caught the Shigasa's attention. Right, there was a good chance he'd been caught red-handed, which meant it was only a matter of time before the Hinagamis were informed. I can't go back. Inspector Inui's there, too. I'll be done for if he performs a search of the mountains. I had to look at the trunk with Satsuki's limbs. He still hadn't uncovered the truth behind her death. A moment later, he rose to his feet. I can't afford to get caught. Ayato shoveled the snow next to the hut and dug up the earth. Oh. So he's gonna bury her limbs. Alright. I get that he doesn't want to implicate himself, right? And obviously if he just tries to pass off the trunk, like... I don't know, but I feel like you'd probably want to let the inspector know. Would be my guess, but whatever. He's clearly not thinking clearly, right? And I'm not even saying my idea is the right idea to go with, but still. The ground was frozen solid, so it required a lot of work even with the tip of the shovel. And yet Ayato just kept digging on in the dark, like his life depended on it. Eventually he made a small hole. He lowered the trunk into it. Ayato apologized before burying the trunk. He then stomped the ground hard before covering it with kindling and timber. After that, he buried it under snow again, leveled the area. Now it wouldn't be so easy to find. Ayato turned his back on the hut and wandered off across the snow. He had no destination in mind. He simply journeyed for the base of the mountain, allowing no other thoughts to distract him as he ventured out into the unknown. Okay. So he doesn't know the truth of what... Crying. Okay, so we're going back to Toko here. The newborn life had brought into this world was crying. Why? Why was this child crying? 'Cause that's just what childs be doing. Were they lamenting the life fate had in store for them? It was a girl. Okay. Just like I'd wanted. Okay. Now everything could go according to plan. She'd been given life to shoulder her destiny, so her future was set in stone. This child would aid her down that path. For nothing would grant me greater bliss. I must raise her strictly for that purpose. After all, this is for them. What? Dude. Okay, no. Corniche 5, alright.
僕はなんとか山を越え別の集落にたどり着きました。そこから富山に出て東京まで逃げてきたんです。
Okay. So he doesn't know for sure what his father's involvement. He does know that it was his father's actions that led to his mother's suicide. Unless there's something he didn't tell us, right? But I don't think that's the case. Maybe that will come into play. He knows where Satsuki's limbs are buried. So they could finally dig those up and maybe crack the case in some fashion. Because like all this time I thought he had like found concrete, information on his father. And that's why he had like the visceral reaction to his father's photo. But it seems like it's just connected to his mother's suicide. So he holds resentment against him for that. So then the real question is, how does this connect back to the present day murders then? Like, if I believe that Nanako and Karen are involved in that, how does this connect back to... It doesn't necessarily connect to what Ayato did, but I feel like Ayato has some involvement in it, right? Like, obviously, we know Ayato is not the core piece of the case because one of them is a, Senri member. So it's not like Ayato is the cornerstone of all these cases, but he has obvious connections to the first and third victims. And the question is, why were they chosen? Interesting. Musky, no, Ayato Hinagami, wrapped up his story with those words.
正木智之を名乗り始めたのはそれからか。
生きていくにはどうしても金が必要になりますから。戸籍を取得し直し、恩給を受け取り。
Masaki rose to his feet and held his hands out to Yaginuma, who'd been listening in silence the whole time.
殺人と詐欺。他にもいろいろ罪状はあるで。
Yaginuma snorted and looked my way. I shrugged.
どうしてこの僕がそんな面倒なことをしなければならないのですか？
Not my problem, dude.
自分そんな田舎の事件、今さら捕まえたところで何の得にもなりませんから。そもそも本当にあった事件なのかすら定かではありませんからね。
でも僕は。
もちろん高宮めぐりを殺害したと白状してくれればいくらでも逮捕して差し上げますがね。
Masaki shut up. It seemed he had no intention to take the fall for Meguri Takamiya's murder. We'd unveiled Masaki's secrets and learned all about his connections to both her and Naori Kuroya. Thus playing innocent would no longer help him in any way by this point.
おい、バカ野郎。まさかお前はこの後に及んで真犯人をかばっているのか。
Masaki gasped ever so slightly.
あの日、お前が顔を合わせたくない人物がホテルを訪れた。
その後事件が起これば当然その人物が犯人である可能性が高まりますね。
フロントで尋ねなくても部屋番号を知っている近しい人間だろうな。雛神綾人と顔見知りという点を考えれば人型集落出身の人間だろう。
心当たりがあるようですね、先輩には。
何人か知り合いができたからな。さて、雛神綾人、お前があのホテルで見たのはこの人だな。
Alright, quick save, because it's gonna make me make a choice, right? The thing is, Yamanochi told us. Well, that's the thing. Nanako was there at 6. Nanako was there at 6. However, she was not the one who committed the murder. It's quite possible that Karen could have showed up later. I think I already mentioned this. Well, that's as good a confession as any.
なるほど。
He's wearing his reaction on his sleeve, possibly because I added him to the wall. No, he'd probably always been a crappy liar. Also didn't help that hiding his identity for over a decade had likely done a real number on his psyche. No wonder he'd been seeing a psychiatrist.
沢城七子は東京に出てきているんですか？
朽木病院に看護婦として勤めているそうだ。
え？
Masaki looked up.
あの病院にいたんですか？
かは違うそうだが、本当に接点はなかったのか？お前だってあそこには長いこと通っていたんだろう。
僕は気づきませんでした。でも向こうは気づいていたんでしょうね。
Masaki's reaction made it all but certain that it was Nanako Sawashiro he'd seen. That opened up a whole new can of worms.
柳沼、被害者の死亡推定時刻は？
忘れたんですか？12月20日午後8時頃ですよ。
So 7:30 to 8:30 p.m., huh?
沢城七子は当日午後8時から夜勤が入っていた。遅れて勤務に入ったなどとは聞いていない。
お茶の水から中野まで30分もあれば移動は可能では
？30分で移動するだけならな。実際には列車の待ち時間や勤務に入る前の準備などもあるから。
今回のは死後遺体に加工を施していますから。
So basically, she couldn't have possibly had time to tamper with the crime scene.
もう一度確認するぞ、まさき。お前がホテルで見かけたのは沢城七子で間違いないんだな。
はい。あの人を見つけて僕は裏口から出て行きました。
Masaki nodded obediently, probably because he was now sure Nanako couldn't have been the killer. But then that meant
沢城七子の後に訪問した人物がいるというわけですか。
彼女が遅刻せず病院に現れたことが確かならば、そうとしか考えられない。
沢城七子を確保しますか。殺害していない可能性が高いだけで重要参考人には変わりありません。
そっちは俺が話を聞きに行く。
gripped Masaki's shoulder.
隠していることがまだあるのなら、今のうちに洗いざらいぶちまけておけ。
So there's still more, huh? Knew it.
やれやれ。こちらから尋問せざるを得ないようですね。
At least he hadn't said torture.
その左手、自殺を図ったそうですが、そのきっかけは何ですか？
見つけられたからですよ、七子さんに。彼女はひながみ家に頼まれて自分を探していたそうです。
If I had to guess, they tasked her with locating their prodigal son because the two of them had been acquaintances growing up.
まさかあの病院にいたとは知りませんでしたが、彼女に見つかりひながみ家の跡取りとして戻るよう言われ。
Talk about short-sighted. And again, maybe that just went to show how cornered he felt.
なぜ沢城七子がひながみ家の代わりに君を探していたんだ？
理由はわかりません。偶然自分を見かけただけかもしれません。
跡取りとして戻るということは結婚の予定もあったのか？
見合いですよ。ひながみの血を残すことしか頭にない人たちですから。
沢城七子が？
いえ、そこまでは。相手も何も聞かされる前でしたから。
Muskie gripped his left wrist.
入院中、沢城七子は何か言ってきたか？
いえ、それが何も。
遠慮していたのかもしれませんね。
That sure was a funny word coming from Yaginuma.
そのあたりのことも聞いてくるさ。
Patted Masaki's back and brought him to his feet.
え？自分もですか？
構わないだろう、柳沼。逮捕されているわけでもないんだし。
それでも逃亡されないようにお願いしますよ。
I ignored Yaginuma's sarcastic ribbing and left the interrogation room with Masaki. We drove all the way over to Shinjuku Avenue through Miyakezaka after departing the MPD.
それにしてもまあ、よくあの病院に通う気になったな。
黒谷の親戚だとは知らなかったんですよ。昔会ったことはありましたけど。
Apparently Fumiya and Chizuru Kichiki's mother had, in fact, been Naori Kuroya's aunt on his mother's side. Meanwhile, Naori's father, Yuzuru, was Masaki's uncle on his father's side, meaning the Kichikis and Hinagamis were related through the Kuroyas.
あそこに通い始めたのは2年ほど前からです。
沢城七子は非常勤で小児科担当だったそうだから。
And yet despite that, she had found Masaki all the same. She must have immediately known he was using an alias too. What confused me was how she had notified the Hinagamis rather than the hospital. They may have been old friends, but this guy was on the lam for homicide all the same. So it'd have only been natural for her to have reported him to someone instead of.
時坂さん前
Masaki shouts, snapping back to my senses. I dodged a Metropolitan Electric Railway streetcar just in the nick of time. Apparently, I'd driven right onto the tracks without even noticing.
ちゃんと前見て運転してくださいよ。
心配するなって。昔は露光橋の上も目をつぶって走らせたんだからな。
嘘つかないでください。
I parked right outside Chiki Hospital and exited the car with case files in hand.
無茶な運転はやめてくださいよ。
Masaki wearily wobbled out of the car.
制限速度も信号も守っていただろう。
ええ、もうそっちの方が慣れていますし。
Probably still wanted to keep his identity as secret as possible. Though maybe that was pointless, seeing as how we were about to meet someone who'd known him as Ayato Hinagami. I headed for Kaharu's office after entering the hospital.
失礼します。
お待ちしていました、時坂さん。
どうも。
Masaki gave a little bow.
沢城さんを呼んでまいりますので。
ああ、山内先生。その前に、沢城さんは20日の夜勤に遅れずやってきましたか？
ええ、確か8時前にはこちらに来ていましたよ。
そうですか。ありがとうございます。
ええ。
Kaharu left the
まあ
office.
どうか。
I plopped onto the sofa and gestured Masaki over.
ええ。
Masaki took a seat right next to me. Neither of us made a sound for quite some time.
彼女はいつからこっちに来ていたんだ？
本人に聞いてみたらどうだ？俺は親の都合としか聞いていない。
奈々子さんの父親はもともと鉱山技師で、自分が向こうにいた頃から体調を崩しがちで働いていなかったと聞いていますが。
東京で働き口が見つかったんだろうな。戦後は復興も人手不足でなかなか進まなかったからな。
そうなんですかね。
Didn't sound like Masaki bought that.
あまりいい噂がなかった人なんですよ。彼女が稼いでくるお金も博打や酒に費やして。
I was about to reply when the door suddenly opened, with Kaharu and another nurse filing in.
お待たせしました。
Damn, girl.
ああ、あなたが沢城さんでしたか。
I'd seen her around the hospital several times before. This was the first time I'd had a name for her face. The woman froze in the doorway as soon as she saw Masaki.
隼人君。
お久しぶりです。
Masaki bowed his
おおよ
head.
そのところは彼から聞いています。
Hanako sat on the sofa across from us.
では、私は席を外していますので。
Kaharu went back into the hallway, shutting the door behind her.
まずは彼を見つけた時のことを話してもらえますか。
I gestured to Masaki.
同僚から話を聞いたのが最初です。なんてことのない相談でしたけれど、こっそり見に行って隼人君だとすぐに気づきました。
その時、今もですが、彼は正木智之と名乗っていました。
ひな神という姓は目立ちますから、それで変名を使っていたのだと思いました。
I glanced at Masaki out of the corner of my eye. He was listening to Nanako with a furrowed brow. So she didn't think it was because he was on the run for murdering Saya Shikasa? That was odd, but I decided it was best not to ask for now.
それで親父に伝えたんですか？
そうしないわけにはいかなかったから。するとこちらから隼人君に接触することは禁じられ、お見合いの準備を進めていたようです。
接触を禁じた理由は彼の逃亡を防ぐためでしょう。
Nanako nodded feebly.
隼人君は家を継ぐのが嫌で出ていったと聞いていましたから。
Okay, so that's why. They kept the community in the dark. It was just another murder to sweep under the rug, right? Okay. Nanako doesn't know what he did. Meguri didn't know what he did. Karen might know, because she's kind of like the heiress at this point. But the community at large doesn't know that, right? Obviously, the Shigasas and Hinagamis know, but they're sweeping it all under the rug, right? Masaki asked the very question I've been avoiding.
確かに隼人君が出て行ってすぐにさやさんは亡くなられましたが、何か関係が。
Yeah, people started to say, "Where's Saya? Oh, she's fallen ill." And then, "Oh, we're sorry to report that she passed away."
それは
I let my hand to stop Masaki before he blabbed any further.
沢城さん、そのさやさんという方に。
病死と聞いています。
Nanako Nanako answered promptly. However, she didn't sound like she really believed that.
診断はどなたが
I kept Masaki quiet in his seat as I continued questioning Nanako.
黒谷委員の委員長が臨終を見とったそうです。私は立ち会っていませんでした。
Yep. So the Kuro, that obviously shows that the Kuroes are in on it too. Alright. Crossed my arms in contemplation. On one hand, Saya Shikasa was indeed dead. There was no question about that. But on the other hand, Nanako Saoshio's account contradicted Masaki's testimony. If I took what he said as fact, then maybe her murder was covered up as a natural death. Absolutely. That would certainly explain why Megari Takamiya never treated him as a murderer. Otherwise, she probably would have had scruples hanging out with him, old friends or not. I got the impression that Nanako Sawashiro hadn't been quite as convinced by the deception, though. Assuming I was right about all this, that is.
このバカが出奔した時、集落内は騒ぎになりましたか？
それはもう集落中が総出で探しました。麓で見かけたという人がいたので、山を降りてどこかへ行ったのだろうと思ってましたが。
すみません。ご迷惑をおかけし。
Masaki hung his head.
生きていることが分かって安心したわ。
Nanako's face fell both figuratively and literally.
高宮さんについてはどのくらいご存知ですか？
亡くなったということくらいしか。私が会いに行った直後に殺されてしまったと聞いています。
ええ。何か彼女に変わった様子などはありませんでしたか？
いえ、特には。結婚のことも。
こいつとのですか？
I pointed at Masaki.
自分は結婚してひな神に戻るつもりはないと言いました。
それを伝えて納得する人たちだと思いますか？
それは。
Masaki shamefacedly looked at the door.
沢城さんはその指示を誰から受けたままっていたのですか？
綾人君の父親のしずるさんです。お見合いの相手もしずるさんが決めていたと聞いています。
So Shizuru is selecting these marriage candidates, right? But mayhaps there's a jealous older sister who has a brotherfucker complex, dispatching of the... It'd be very strange for Mr. Shizuru to consider the... what is her name? Miski Itose? As she seemed to be quite the nobody. But... if in fact she wasn't, and had some connection to Hitogata, maybe even to the Shigasas, as she was a part of Senri, maybe that's our thread connecting these.
じいさんじゃないんですか？
秀臣さんは最近ずっと床に伏せっているようだから。
じいさんは
ひな神しずるさんは東京にいらっしゃるのですか？
ええ、事業本部は四谷にあります。本社の所在地は富山だと思いますが。
Could leave them to Yaginuma. In the meantime, I still had questions for this woman.
高宮めぐりさんが殺されたことについて。
先ほども言った通り、その直前に会っていましたが。
Nanako studied me as if trying to figure out what was going through my
あ
head.
なたを疑っているわけではないので安心してください。
そうですか。
Didn't seem relieved to hear that. Hardly surprised that it didn't change that her old friend had been murdered.
後で誰かに会う予定など言っていたりはし。
Which would likely make the killer either an uninvited guest or a burglar. That said, the state of the crime scene all but ruled out the latter. Took photos out of an envelope full of documents. They were color photos taken for forensics. Hid away the graphic shots of the body and just showed the ones of the evidence found at the crime scene to Nanako.
こういったものに見覚えはありませんか？
Nanako gasped when she saw the clay doll that had been in the corpse's abdomen.
現場に残されていたものです。あなたがいた時。
I waited for a response.
これ前も見せられましたよね。
インナ様、どうして部屋の外でたたりが。
たたり。どういうことですか？
Certainly I'd been expecting that reaction from her.
これがヒンナ様。
Muskie gasped too as he stared at the photo.
間違いないわ。形は少し違うけれど、川瀬さんの時と同じ。
ええ、そうです。しかし、これがヒンナ様と呼ばれるものだとは。
I glared at Masaki.
ひな神家の神棚に祀られていたのは事実ですが、自分は見たこともありません。
Masaki shook his head.
彼女はたたりで殺されたのですか？
まさき、彼女を殺したのは人間だよ。
Same went for Maya Kamizono and Misaki Itose. People could call it a curse all they wanted, but no matter how you spun it, a human had been behind those. Still, couldn't believe the mystery of the clay doll was connected to Masaki, or rather, the Hinagamis. This couldn't all be coincidence, I was sure of that. These homicides had to be centered around this nitwit.
失礼。上園真由さんの出身はどちらですか？
上園さん、確か東京だったと思います。
では、糸瀬瑞希という女性に心当たりはありませんか？
いえ、存じ上げていません。
The killer's MO had been identified as being in line with Hitogato's curse of Lord Hina. The link between the victims was still big as blank as
そ
before.
のヒンナ様にたたられるのは誤った祭り方をしたものだとこいつから聞きましたが。
I asked the two former Hitogata residents for their input.
いえ、故郷の集落以外では。
自分は正しい祭り方すら教わっていません。おそらくひな神と仕草の上の方だけが知っているのだと。
重要なのはヒンナ様という伝承がどれだけ広まっているかだよ。
The story said your wish would be granted if you worshipped it correctly. That sounds like a bunch of crock to me personally. It's probably some myth the Hinagami's forefathers kept up to make their family sound special. The fact that this faith was exclusive to Hitogata meant the murderer had to be someone from that settlement. Worshipping Lord Hina wrong gets you cursed. Ergo, those cursed were followers of Lord Hina. If those clay dolls stuffed in the victims' abdomens were supposed to be the Lord Hinas that they'd incorruptibly worshipped, that would have to mean Megari Takamiya had one in her hotel room. An unlikely tale if I've ever heard one. It'd have been an entirely different story if she'd brought it with her, of course, but there was no doubt in my mind that the killer was the one who planted it there. Someone's out there murdering people and passing off as the work of that curse, huh? Masaki's story painted the Shigesa family in the most suspicious light, but...
集落で起こった事件は解決したのですか？
私があちらにいた間に解決したという話は聞いていて。
控訴事項停止の措置が取られていなければ昨年の春には時効になっているでしょうね。
But all that meant was that the case could no longer be tried. It didn't erase the crime itself. Therefore, it was possible the culprit from back then was involved with this case. That was definitely something to keep in mind. Still, why such a big gap between murders then? I looked at Masaki. Is it him? Sure, certainly hadn't happened in the years he'd been gone, at least. I was starting to wonder if it'd be quicker for all of us if we just arrested him. Kaginuma probably felt the same.
そろそろよろしく。
ああ、そうですね。
I'd already asked most of my big questions by this point
俺たち
anyway.
も一旦戻る。
え
The two of us exited Kahara's office. Masaki turned his head like he noticed something. Followed suit to find a familiar girl in hospital pajamas strolling our way.
やあ、みちる。
Ichiro immediately performed a right about face when I called out to her.
白崎さん、検温の時間。もう逃げちゃダメよ。
Hanako grabbed Michiro as the latter tried to make a break for it.
入院患者ですか？
Masaki cocked his
見
head.
ればわかるだろ。
すみません、わたわたしちゃって。
Hanako bowed with Michiro in tow.
誰？
Michiro looked up at Masaki.
悪い人だよ。
そう。
Michiro took a few steps back.
最悪の紹介をしないでください。
Hey, just telling it how it is. Masaki and I left the hospital and returned to the car.
あれがヒンナ様だったんですね。
お前が見たことないというのは本当なんだろう
あれは実物を見せられた時に気づいてますよ。
な。しかしな。ガキの自分に神棚を覗いたりもしなかったのか？
そんなことが許されないほど厳しくしつけられていたんです。
あの土人形。ヒンナ様について詳しく知っているのは誰だ？
うちの祖父母と仕草神社の方たちでしょうか。
Someone in that group was most likely the murderer. If not, then at least someone closely linked to them. It seemed I just have to pay the village a visit and ask around for myself. Today was December 22nd. I left just under a week and a half until New Year's. If I took a few days to get ready, I could stop by Hitogata and be back in time to greet 1958. Hopefully, anyway. Good drive there. Actually, best not to on second thought. I wasn't so sure I could handle snowy mountain roads after all. Yeah, no, you don't want to fuck with snowy mountain roads. Because that means a night train then.
そうするか。
何？
後で説明してやるから車に乗れ。
I'll have to bring this guy along for the ride too. They'd probably, no, definitely be against it.
嫌ですよそりゃ。
Talk about the mother of all surprises.
とは言ってもな、案内は必要だし、孤立した集落だとよそ者は目立つだろう。
自分だってもうよそ者みたいなもんですよ。
そうなるとお前さんの保護というか監視を別のやつに。
Pointing at the man strolling our way, Yaginuma.
それは余計に嫌です。
何やら悪口が聞こえてきた気がした。
お前が仕事熱心だという話をしていただけさ。
まあいいでしょう。それで
Yaginuma shot Masaki a look.
くれぐれも逃亡させないようにしてくださいよ。
そう心配するなよ。こいつが実家に逃げ込むとでも思っているのか。
We were talking about a runaway after all.
富山県警で捜査に当たっていた刑事がいるそうです。向こうではその人に話を聞いてください。
乾さんですか？
確かそんな名前の人です。捜査の中止命令が出てからも調べ続けている面倒な人らしいですよ。
そりゃ上の人間からしたら面倒そうだな。
まったくです。
You're gonna believe the bastard actually agreed with a straight face.
いつ出ますか？
2、3日の間には行く。それまでは少し準備することがある。
わかりました。ではくれぐれ
Oh,
も
we're
面
gonna
倒は
cause
起こ
so
さない
much
でくだ
trouble
さ
over
い
there
よ
and just you
先
fucking
輩。
wait. Sit back.
心配するな。分別はわきまえているつもりだよ。
I dropped Masaki off in Shinjuku and went home. I had to sort through what I'd learned from his testimony and get the ball rolling on a few things before my trip. The next few days are going to be such a drag. No, something tells me they're going to be very, very exciting. You're not going to enjoy them by all means, but they're not going to be boring.
ただいま。
Oh wait, no. Never mind. The next few days are going to be a drag. It's when you actually get the Hitogata in a few days that are going to be exciting. My bad.
おかえりなさい兄さん。お夕飯ができていますよ。
お、今日は鍋か。
ええ。外は寒かったでしょ。着替えてきてくださいな。
ああ、缶を1本つけておいてくれ。
はい、わかりました。
I returned to my room and took off my coat. The place was freezing, probably because I hadn't been home all day. So I hastily made a retreat to the living room.
はい、どうぞ。
Yukari handed me a bowl. A pot fresh off the stove sat on the table. Inside were boiled chicken and vegetables.
暑いので気をつけてくださいね。
そう心配しなくても大丈夫だぞ。あ、そうそう。数日出かけることになりそうだから。
あら、いつからですか？
まだ決めてはいない。
でしたら25日以降にしてはいただけませんか？
何かするのか？
皆さんを誘ってささやかながらパーティーをしようと思いまして。
Guess it's fine. It's gonna take me a day or two to get ready anyway. Are we sure we want to do that, Yukari? Like, there's a serial killer going around, right? And you remember the last time you tried to throw a party at your place while there was a serial killer going around? You remember that? You gotta remember that, right? Like, it was it's one thing if like the whole serial killer thing wasn't happening. Hey, all good. Throw a party with your friends. But yeah, no, there's a serial killer going around. And currently, you know, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. This one seems to be targeting adult women by the looks of it. He has yet to target any underage women, so you kind of have that going for you. I'll give you that much. You know, no students have been disappearing from your school as of late, so that's a plus. But maybe, you know, with the track record that parties at your house have, maybe we shouldn't do that while there is an active serial killer. Just in case. You know, just throw it out there. Just a suggestion. Maybe let's not do that.
それで、まさきさんも招いてほしいのですが。
イブの夜に一人事務所で留守番というのもかわいそうだしな。
よろしくお願いしますね。
It'd be best to get some presents too. Considered my travel expenses for the trip to Toyama, along with how many people we'd likely have at the party. Because I've got to start budgeting. Ueno Station was absolutely packed the week before New Year's. Yet the area she chose for our rendezvous was sadly, as I'd expected, practically deserted.
遅い。
Disgruntled Toji Aoki was leaning against the food stall.
悪いな。いろいろと分かったことをまとめていた。
Handed over an envelope full of documents.
あの土人形はどこかの神様だったらしいな。
そのあたりのことは現地に行って詳しく調べるつもりだ。
Toji secured the envelope under her left armpit and smoothly removed the documents with her only hand.
ヒンナ様ね。これは典型会と関係。
まだはっきりと無関係とは言い切れないが、糸瀬瑞希が殺されたことに関して典型会の関与はないと思われる。
断定するのもいかがなものかと思うがな。
分かってるさ。だからこそ調査は続けてほしい。
それは構わないが、今は会の金の流れを追っている。どこかに大きな資金源があるようでな。
信者からの寄進じゃないのか。
過去の戦利品では未来史などで資金を稼いでいたが、今は違う。
金の流れがあるのなら、そこに必ず人の欲望が生まれる。
先ほど関与はないとお前が言ったはずだが、
断定できない以上、他の可能性も考えておく必要があるだろう。
その通りだな。
数日後には富山に行って土人形について調べてくる。
待て、富山だと。
Toji suddenly grabbed my
お
shoulder.
う何かあるのか。
当たり前だ。越中味噌といえば塩分と水分が高く、魚料理にとてもよく合うんだぞ。
Toji, they're fucking miso. I love this woman. Toji suddenly started rambling madly.
そうだ、一升。いや、5号でいいから買ってきてくれないか。富山市や高岡のあたりには。
まあ、土産程度でいいの。
すまない。恩に着る。できれば買った店以外でも。
That sells it. She really should have picked a career as a miso critic instead. Yaginuma stretched out once he'd finished poring over the pile of documents he'd requested. He was at his office in CID Section 1, his base ever since he'd been sent out on loan to the MPD. Threw his legs atop his personal desk and drank his cold tea. Most of the department's inspectors were out. And not because it was almost New Year's. Their job simply didn't call for them to be glued to their desks, meaning this was in fact the natural state of things here. Besides, they had more than Tomoyuki Masuki's case on their plate. As such, they couldn't afford to sit around just focusing on that one. And yet in spite of that,
おかしな話だ。
Yaginuma was doing exactly that, mumbling to himself. More specifically, he was reviewing internal documents from Hinagami Pharmaceuticals. Now that the reveal of Tomoyuki Masuki's true identity had made them relevant to the case, he ordered an investigator to check them for anything unusual, and yet...
過去10年、判明しているだけでも17名か。
Yaginuma scanned over the number of employees' deaths once again. Oh, damn. Employee deaths. Oh. All of them had died of disease or accidentally, nothing that hinted at foul play. However, there were also reports of young employees, along with others who'd only worked there a few months, dying suddenly. Since the company had many employees, and this included incidents from just after the war ended, Yaginuma couldn't claim it was an unnatural mortality rate. However, the problem wasn't the number of deaths. Rather, it was one of the people who died. Satoru Itase. Aha! He had been Mizuki Itase's father. Year of death, 1952. Cause of death, disease. He worked at Hinagami Pharmaceuticals laboratory. He's dead within Hinagami Pharmaceuticals. This is merely conjecture, but perhaps there were even more before and during the war. They simply neglected to record them. Yaginuma read a document about Hinagami Pharmaceuticals' accomplishments. From what he could see, they had developed a plethora of new medications for decades now, even before the war. After the Pharmaceutical Affairs Law was amended in 1943 to optimize pharmaceutical development, they continued production, supplying many products to the military. With that said, there was nothing unusual about doing such a thing in wartime. They probably co-developed those drugs along with military medical universities and the like. Furthermore, there were also organizations rumored to have conducted dubious experiments, much like Noborito Laboratory. Thus, it was perfectly reasonable to suspect Hinagami Pharmaceuticals once had ties with groups like those. After all, Yotsuya, home of the Hinagami Pharmaceuticals Tokyo branch, was just a stone's throw away from Ichigaya, the former location of the Army's GHQ.
人体実験、いや、臨床試験か。
Wasn't there, in Cartagra, there was some kind of medicine people company. The family that Arashima used to belong to, right? One sec, we're doing a little bit of, investigating. Narahashi, that was the original name. He was Narahashi, which obviously has nothing to do with Hinagami, as far as we know. Interesting. Yeah. It might be a stretch to assume that the group that Arashima was originally involved in would be involved. Especially considering how he took over Senri, which was initially run by Shigesa's, I believe. But he says human experimentation, which kind of makes me think, you know, maybe. Clinical trials for testing the efficacy of new medications. The possibility cannot be ruled out. After there have been stories of proactive biological weapon research being carried out during the war, have these people been victims of such a thing?
考えすぎですかね。
But now that he can see the possibility, he knew he had to look into it.
そこの君、
Yaginuma summoned a young police inspector who was still in the building.
管理官殿、何かご用でしょうか。
ひながみ製薬について調べてくれ。
Yaginuma held out his teacup to the inspector, staying at attention.
茶を頼む。熱いのをな。
I visited a residential district near Inokashira Park for the first time in what felt like an eternity. On its outskirts was a building that had once been a clinic, Kichiki residence. It had to have been well over a year since I was last there. I rang the doorbell and waited a bit.
お待ちしておりました。
どうも。
We exchanged terse pleasantries.
電話でもお伝えした通り、父は不在ですが、どうぞ。
I took her up on that offer and followed her inside.
富山に行かれるとか。
She was at a boutique as she asked me that question.
ええ。あなたも戦前には訪れたことがあるとか。
ええ。
Zidoro glanced up at the setting sun.
短い間でしたが、様々なことがありま
It
した。
sure was, wasn't it? Your brother lost, you know, the stubs of his fingers, then you fucked him. Yeah, very eventful. She opened a box next to her and retrieved an envelope.
こちら、黒谷さん宛ての手紙です。
預からせていただきます。
I took the envelope.
まだトークを諦めていないのですか。
Those words stunned me for a
も
second.
ちろん諦めたつもりはありません。
だからといって、
医師が適切な処置を施していれば。
Though I wasn't fool enough not to realize there's only so much good that could do.
私にはあなたを止める権利はありません。
Gisela shook her head ever so slightly.
どうぞ、お好きになさってください。
I knew this was solely for my own satisfaction. But even if her chances of survival were next to none, I wanted to find Toko.